I am Hannah, and this is the story of how I lost the one man who loved me more than anyone ever could. All because I couldn't see beyond the surface. I still remember the day I laughed at his old car. The sound of that laugh still echoes in my mind sometimes. Sharp, careless, almost cruel. It was meant to be funny, just a harmless joke. But that moment, it became the beginning of the end. Liam was never flashy. He wasn't the type to show off or talk too much about himself. He drove an old car, a faded blue sedan that looked like it had lived to many winters, the kind of car you'd pass by in the parking lot without a second glance. Back then, I thought love was supposed to look like something: expensive dinners, sleek cars, designer gifts. I grew up believing that success had a shape, a sound, a sparkle. And Liam? He didn't fit that picture. He was quiet, gentle, kind. Too kind, maybe. When he picked me up that evening for dinner, I remember standing there in my red dress, heels clicking against the pavement, expecting something grand. Then I saw the car. The paint was chipped. One of the mirrors had a crack. The handle stuck a little before opening. I laughed. Right there in front of him. He smiled. But it was that kind of smile people wear when they're trying to hide something: pain, disappointment, maybe both. I didn't stop to think what that moment did to him. I just kept talking, pretending it was no big deal. I didn't know then that the car I laughed at was more than it seemed. That beneath its old metal shell was a story, one that carried a name, a legacy, and a secret I would only uncover when it was too late. A name written right there on the registration slip. Henry Whitmore. A name the world respected. A name I would come to fear. When I first met Liam, I didn't notice his car. I didn't notice his shoes, or the worn edges of his jacket, or the fact that his watch didn't shine under the light like the ones my friends wore. What I noticed was his voice. It was calm, steady in a way that made you want to keep listening. He had this quiet confidence, like someone who didn't need to fill silence with words. We met at a small coffee shop just outside the town square. I was there to escape the noise of my office, the endless calls, the pressure, the small talk that meant nothing. He was sitting by the window, a book open in front of him, a cup of black coffee cooling at his elbow. When I dropped my keys, he was the only one who looked up. He smiled, not the kind of smile that tries too hard, but the kind that makes you feel seen. "Bad day?" he asked. I laughed softly. "More like a bad week." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Then maybe this is a good place to let it end." I don't know what made me sit down. Maybe it was the way his voice carried warmth, or maybe I was just tired of pretending I had everything figured out. Either way, that was how it began, over a cup of coffee, under the soft hum of rain against the window. Liam wasn't like the men I usually met. He didn't talk about money, or power, or who he knew. He asked about my favorite books, my dreams, what made me laugh as a child. He listened, really listened. And in a world where everyone seemed too busy showing off, his silence felt like peace. Weeks turned into months. Coffee turned into long walks, late-night calls, and those moments when words weren't needed at all. I found myself looking forward to seeing him. His calm presence was like a gentle anchor in my restless world. But love, I've learned, doesn't live in a vacuum. The world around you has a way of testing it, shaping it, twisting it into things you never meant it to become. My friends didn't understand. "Where did you even meet him?" one of them asked during brunch. "At a coffee shop," I said, smiling. "A coffee shop," she echoed, her brows lifting. "Hannah, he doesn't even have a LinkedIn page." "What does he do?" "He's between things right now," I said softly. "He used to work with his father, but he's doing something different." "Oh, so he's unemployed." I laughed it off, but her tone stung. That's when it started. The little thoughts that creep in when you're alone. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm settling. Maybe I should want more. Liam never made me feel small. If anything, he made me feel safe. But sometimes, safety can look too simple to people who've been taught to chase excitement. He lived in a small rented house by the lake, a place that smelled of pine and sunlight. He fixed things himself, cooked from scratch, and read by lamplight. One evening, as we sat on his porch, watching the sky turn gold, he turned to me and said, "You know, Hannah, I don't have much, but what I do have, I give completely." I remember smiling. "You talk like love's all that matters." He chuckled softly. "Maybe it is." At the time, I thought he was being naive. Now, I think he was the only one who really understood what love was. As months passed, we grew closer. He met my family, polite but distant. My mother asked him what his father did. He just smiled and said, "He's retired now." That was all. No explanation, no hint of the empire behind that name. My parents weren't impressed. They wanted someone established, someone who could promise me a certain kind of life, not a man who drove an old car and lived by a lake. But I chose him anyway. When Liam asked me to marry him, it wasn't in a fancy restaurant or under fireworks. It was on that same porch, under the soft hum of crickets, his hand trembling slightly as he slipped the ring onto my finger. It wasn't expensive, just simple silver with a small stone that caught the moonlight. I remember whispering, "Yes." And for a while, it felt like the world had gone quiet, like all the noise, all the expectations had faded away. But life doesn't stay that simple for long. The closer the wedding came, the louder the outside voices grew. Friends asking what kind of car he drove. Relatives wondering what kind of man doesn't buy his fiancée a diamond. And though I told myself I didn't care, a small, ugly part of me started to listen. The part that wanted to show them I hadn't made a mistake, that I hadn't fallen for someone ordinary. So the day he came to pick me up in that old blue car, the day I laughed, it wasn't really about the car. It was about me trying to silence the doubts I'd let other people plant. If I could go back now, I'd hold that laugh inside. I'd touch his hand, look him in the eyes, and tell him that love doesn't need polishing to shine. But I didn't. And what happened after? The quiet way he changed. The secret he kept all began from that one careless moment. After that day, something in Liam changed. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was subtle, like a light dimming, one shade at a time, until you almost didn't notice how dark it had become. He still smiled. Still opened doors for me. Still made my morning coffee just the way I liked, strong, with a hint of caramel. But the warmth behind his eyes was quieter now. There were pauses between his words. A softness that used to reach for me no longer did. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I told myself he was just tired, that maybe work or money was stressing him out. But deep down, I knew it was me. It was that laugh, the one that told him I was ashamed of the life he offered. The wedding came and went quietly. We didn't have a big ceremony, just close friends, a few family members, and the smell of roses in the air. But even then, I remember looking around at the simple setup, the white chairs, the plain cake, and feeling something missing. Not from him, from me. I'd let the world convince me that love had to look grand to feel real. After the ceremony, my mother hugged me and whispered, "You can always make him better, dear." A little push in the right direction. Liam overheard it. He didn't say a word. He just smiled, that quiet, wounded smile that broke my heart, years later when I remembered it. Our married life started in a small apartment overlooking the lake. It wasn't fancy, but it had big windows that let the morning light in. Liam fixed the squeaky doors himself, built shelves for my books, and left small notes around the house. Little reminders that said things like, "You're my peace," or "I'll never stop trying." But I was changing. The world outside our home didn't let me forget what I thought I deserved. At work, my colleagues talked about vacations in Paris, their husbands' new cars, expensive dinners. I came home to a man who hummed while cooking stew in a dented pot, a man who drove me to work in that same old blue car. And little by little, my gratitude turned into quiet resentment. One evening, I came home to find Liam sitting by the window, staring at a letter. He folded it quickly when I walked in. "What's that?" I asked. "Just something from Dad," he said casually. I nodded, not thinking much of it, but something about the way he said, "Dad, soft, careful," stuck with me. I didn't know much about his father. All I knew was that Liam rarely spoke of him, and whenever I asked, he'd say, "He's just a man who taught me everything I needed to know." Sometimes I wondered if they were estranged. Other times I thought maybe his father wasn't proud of him. I never imagined the truth was the other way around. As months passed, my frustration grew. Our savings were small. The car broke down often. I began comparing our life to everyone else's, like a child counting what others had instead of cherishing what was hers. One night, after another argument about money, I snapped, "Liam, I'm tired of this," I said. "Tired of living like this. You're smart. You could do more, earn more, be more." He looked at me for a long time, then asked softly, "Is this really about the money, Hannah? Or about what people think of us?" I froze, because deep down, he was right. But pride makes you say things you don't mean just to feel less small. So I said, maybe it's about both. He nodded slowly, looked away, and whispered, then maybe I'm not enough for you. It was the first time I saw tears in his eyes, and it terrified me, not because he cried, but because I couldn't find any in mine. The distance grew after that. He started leaving early, coming home late. Sometimes he'd sit outside in the car for a while before coming in, just staring into the night, like he was searching for something he couldn't say out loud. One morning, I noticed a set of documents in the glove compartment, folded neatly beside the registration papers. I almost took them out, but something stopped me. I told myself it wasn't my business. If only I'd looked then, maybe I would have known sooner. Months turned into a year. We stopped holding hands when we walked, stopped cooking together, stopped laughing. Liam still looked at me with love, but it was quieter now, like a candle fighting the wind. He never fought back, never shouted. He just started letting go in small ways, like someone slowly releasing a bird they once wanted to keep, and that hurt more than anger ever could. Then came the night everything changed. We were invited to a colleague's dinner party, one of those fancy gatherings where everyone wore designer clothes and spoke in half smiles. I almost didn't take Liam with me. A part of me was afraid he wouldn't fit in, afraid of what people might say, but he insisted gently, if it matters to you, I'll be there. He wore his best suit, polished his old shoes until they almost shined, and he drove us there in that same blue car. When we arrived, I saw people glance at us, not cruelly, but curiously, the kind of looks that whisper without speaking, and I hated it. I hated the way they saw him, not knowing who he really was, not seeing his quiet strength, his patience, his heart. But instead of standing by him, I let my shame speak louder. When someone joked about vintage cars, I laughed along. And this time, Liam didn't smile. He just looked at me. Long, silent, steady. Later that night, he dropped me home, parked the car, and said softly, Hannah, do you ever wonder why I still drive this? I sighed. Because you're stubborn. He smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to see who would sit beside me, even when the engine coughed. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I do now. That night, he didn't sleep beside me. He stayed on the couch, watching the rain trace lines across the window. The next morning, he was gone. Just a note on the table. I need some time to think. Don't worry about me. Love you always. Days passed, then weeks, no calls, no messages. The house felt emptier than it ever had before, until one afternoon I received a letter from the Department of Motor Vehicles. It was addressed to Liam, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a renewal form for vehicle registration, and right there, under owner's name, I saw it, Henry Whitmore, the name I'd seen on news channels, in business magazines, on buildings downtown. I blinked, my heart racing. No, it couldn't be that Henry Whitmore, the billionaire philanthropist, the man who built half the companies in our state. I checked again. The address matched, the signature bold, neat, familiar, and beneath it, another signature. Liam Henry Whitmore. My hands trembled. The old blue car, the one I mocked, the one I was ashamed of, had his father's name on it. The same father he never talked about. The same father I'd unknowingly insulted by laughing at his son's humility. I sat there for hours, staring at that paper, the edges damp from my tears. Every memory, every laugh, every sigh, every small moment came rushing back like a storm. And for the first time, I realized he hadn't been hiding who he was out of shame. He'd been testing what I loved him for, and I'd failed. I must have read that registration form 100 times. Each time, the same name stared back at me, bold and unmistakable. Henry Whitmore. I whispered it under my breath like a confession. The name felt too heavy, too powerful, too far from the life we had shared. I thought about the car, the dents, the chipped paint, the way Liam had treated it with such quiet care. He'd never looked embarrassed driving it. He never acted like it was beneath him. Now I understood why. It wasn't an old car he couldn't afford to replace. It was a choice. For days, I couldn't sleep. Every moment replayed in my mind, the dinner party, my laugh, his silence, his words. Maybe I just wanted to see who would sit beside me even when the engine coughed. He had meant it. Every bit of it. I realized then that the man I had loved was never testing the world. He was testing me. And I had failed the simplest test of all, to love him without conditions. A week later, I decided to find him. I didn't know where to start, but I remembered the return address on that registration form. Whitmore Estate. It sat at the edge of town, a place I'd passed before without realizing what gates those were. Wide iron arches, white stone walls, a long road lined with birch trees. As I drove there, my heart pounded like it was trying to escape me. The air felt heavier the closer I got. When I reached the gate, a guard stopped me. "Ma'am, this property is private." "I need to see Liam," I said quickly. "Please tell him Hannah is here." He gave me a strange look. "Mr. Liam doesn't take visitors without appointment." "Please," I begged. "Just tell him I'm here." He hesitated, then picked up a phone, murmured something, and after a moment, nodded. "You can go in." The drive up the long path felt endless. When the mansion finally came into view, I froze. It wasn't just a house, it was a world of its own. Tall glass windows, marble steps, the soft sound of water from a distant fountain. Everything looked like it had been built with quiet authority, not to impress, but to last. As I stepped out of my car, an older man appeared at the door. Tall, silver-haired, and calm like someone used to silence and power. He didn't smile, but his eyes, though sharp, weren't unkind. "You must be Hannah," he said softly. "I'm Henry." I didn't know what to say. My throat was dry. "I came to see Liam," I managed. He studied me for a moment, then said, "I don't think he expected you to come." "Please," I whispered. "I just need to see him. Just once." Henry nodded toward the garden. "He's by the lake. He goes there when he needs quiet." As I walked through the wide garden, I could feel his gaze follow me, not judging, just understanding. Maybe he already knew everything. When I reached the lake, I saw Liam sitting on a wooden bench, facing the water. He looked the same calm still, as if he'd been waiting for this silence all his life. "Liam," I said softly. He didn't turn around. After a moment, he said, "You found out?" "Yes." Silence. Only the wind and the rustle of leaves filled the space between us. I walked closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" He finally turned. His eyes, they weren't angry, just tired. "I wanted to," he said quietly. "But every time I tried, I saw the way you looked at me, like you needed me to be more, so I gave you less, to see if you'd still stay." My voice broke. "That's not fair, Liam," he nodded slowly. "No, but love isn't supposed to be a performance, Hannah. It's supposed to be simple, honest." Tears burned in my eyes. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough for you, and you made me feel like who I was wasn't enough for you." His words hit like glass, soft, shattering, final. We stood there for a long time, neither of us knowing what to say. Finally, I whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." He smiled faintly. "I know, but sometimes love dies quietly, not from anger, but from disappointment." I stepped closer. "Please, let me make it right. I'll do anything." He looked away, his eyes on the lake. "Do you know what I realized while I was gone?" "What?" "That love isn't about teaching someone to see your worth. It's about being with someone who already does." The silence after that felt endless. When I turned to leave, I saw Henry watching us from a distance. He walked toward me as Liam stayed by the water. "He still loves you, you know," Henry said softly. Tears streamed down my face. "Then why won't he let me in?" Henry sighed. "Because love can forgive, but it doesn't always forget. Liam learned that from his mother. She left me once for the same reason you laughed at him." I froze. He smiled sadly. "She thought wealth meant happiness. But she came back years later, and by then, it was too late. Liam saw that. He grew up believing that love without truth is fragile." His voice was gentle, like a father speaking not to judge, but to teach. "Sometimes," he said, "God gives us everything we ask for, just to show us it wasn't what we needed." I looked back at Liam, the man I had loved and lost to my own blindness. He stood there, hands in his pockets, the evening sun painting his figure gold against the water. That image stayed with me, his quiet strength, his calm sorrow, his peace. I wanted to run to him, to promise I'd never care about cars or money again. But deep down, I knew some things, once broken, can't be rebuilt the same way. That night, I sat in my car outside the estate for hours, staring at the gates. The same gates that had hidden the truth and my own failure to see it. When I finally drove away, I didn't look back. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I knew if I did, I might never leave. Weeks turned into months. Life moved on. as it always does. But sometimes when I passed a car dealership or heard the sound of an old engine struggling to start, my heart would ache. Because somewhere out there, that same old blue car still ran a little slower, maybe, but still steady. Just like Liam, I never saw him again after that day. But one morning, I received a letter, not from Liam, but from Henry. It was short, written in neat, careful handwriting. "Hannah, he's doing well. He built his own company quietly, under a different name. He's found peace. I thought you should know that he never blamed you. He just wanted you to find peace too." Henry I cried for a long time after reading it, not because I wanted him back, but because I finally understood what love really meant and how deeply I'd misunderstood it when I had the chance. It's strange how life teaches you through silence. After Liam, my world felt quieter, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask for answers, but leaves space for them to arrive. At first, I filled that silence with noise. Work, friends, trips, smiles that didn't reach my eyes. Everyone thought I was fine, that I had simply moved on. But you can't move on from someone who loved you purely. You can only learn to carry that love differently, not as a weight, but as a lesson. I kept the letter from Henry folded neatly in my drawer. Some nights I'd take it out, trace the handwriting, and whisper to the empty room. Not because I thought he could hear me, but because I needed to hear it myself. Sorry for laughing when he needed understanding. Sorry for seeing what he didn't have instead of who he was. Sorry for learning too late what love really meant. I stayed in that little apartment by the lake for a while after he left. At first, it hurt every corner, every scent, every echo of his voice. But slowly, it became a place of memory, not pain. I started tending to the small garden he had built for me. He once told me, "Plants don't need much, just care, consistency, and patience. The rest, they handle on their own." I used to laugh at how simple he made things sound. Now, I understood that it wasn't about the plants. It was about people, about love, about the things that grow quietly when you nurture them instead of trying to control them. One afternoon, months later, I drove past a familiar road, the one that led to his father's estate. I didn't plan to stop. I just slowed down, letting my eyes wander over the trees that lined the path. Then, I saw it parked near the gate, the old blue car, still standing, still shining faintly under the sunlight. Something in me broke and healed at the same time. It wasn't about the car anymore. It was about what it stood for: humility, patience, love without decoration. I rolled down the window and whispered, "Thank you, Liam, for the lessons, for the love I didn't deserve but received anyway, for the silence that taught me more than words ever could." Life, I've learned, doesn't give us closure in big, cinematic ways. It comes in moments, small, quiet ones, like a breeze through an open window or the sound of rain on an empty street. That's how healing found me. Not through new love or grand apologies, but through the realization that losing him wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of understanding myself. Years later, I opened my own little flower shop by the lake. I named it Whitmore Blooms, not as a claim to his name, but as a tribute to the man who once taught me that love, like flowers, doesn't need wealth to grow. Sometimes people come in and ask about the name. I smile and say, it belonged to someone who believed in simple things. And that's all I say. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, a car slowed down near the window. A new model, sleek, silver, elegant. The window rolled down, and for a second, my heart skipped. It wasn't Liam, but the driver, a woman, smiled warmly and said, "You have a beautiful shop. Did you know one of our clients, Mr. Whitmore, mentioned you once? He said, your flowers are the most peaceful in town." I froze. My throat tightened. "He mentioned me," I whispered. She nodded. "Yes," he said, "peace grows where love once lived." I didn't understand what he meant, but it sounded lovely. When she drove away, I stood there for a long time, staring at the fading road. He remembered me, maybe not with love the way he once did, but with peace, and that was enough. That night, I went to the lake again. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm and endless. I closed my eyes and imagined him there, sitting on the old bench, hands in his pockets, looking out at the same horizon. "I hope you're happy, Liam," I whispered. "You deserve everything I couldn't give." The wind brushed against my hair, gentle, almost like a response, and for the first time in years, I smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Love doesn't always end in togetherness. Sometimes it ends in understanding, and that's what Liam gave me: understanding. He showed me that love isn't about cars, or names, or the size of your dreams. It's about quiet loyalty, about choosing someone even when the world says you shouldn't, about sitting beside them when the engine coughs, and believing the journey is still worth it. So, whenever I see an old car, now rusted, tired, imperfect, I don't laugh anymore. I smile, because I remember a man who once taught me that true love doesn't shine. It glows, softly, silently, faithfully. I am Hannah. And this is the story of how I learned that laughter, once careless, can echo for a lifetime. Sometimes I still dream about that morning, the way Liam smiled, the way the sunlight caught in his eyes, and the way my words, so small and thoughtless, built the wall that stood between us. If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self one thing: don't measure love with the things you can see. Because love, real love, is built in the invisible. It's in patience, in quiet care, in staying when it's inconvenient. I used to believe wealth made life safer, that comfort could protect the heart. But now I know the truth. Money can build walls. Love builds homes. And homes don't always have chandeliers or marble floors. Sometimes they have cracked tiles, leaky sinks, and a warmth no mansion can buy. There's a kind of regret that doesn't fade, not the loud kind, but the soft one that stays beneath your heartbeat. It doesn't punish you, it teaches you. Every time you see a happy couple, every time you hear laughter that sounds like love, it reminds you of what you once took for granted. That's how regret becomes wisdom. A few years after the flower shop opened, I placed a framed picture of a vintage blue car near the counter. No one ever asked whose car it was. They just smiled at it, maybe because they saw something peaceful in it. I did too. It was my way of saying sorry and thank you. Sorry for not understanding then. Thank you for teaching me anyway. One evening, an elderly woman came into the shop. She looked around at the flowers, lilies, roses, lavender, and said, "It smells like forgiveness in here." I laughed softly. Maybe that's what it is. She smiled knowingly and added, "Forgiveness isn't for others, dear. It's how we make peace with the parts of ourselves we couldn't love before." I never saw her again. But her words stayed, because that's what Liam had done all along. He forgave me long before I ever said sorry. Now, when I sit by the lake at sunset, I think of him. I picture his calm eyes, his gentle way of speaking, his unshakable patience. And in those moments, I don't feel grief anymore. I feel gratitude. He came into my life as a mirror, showing me not who he was, but who I could be if I learned to love selflessly. And maybe that's what true love is meant to do. Not to last forever, but to change you deeply, quietly, completely. So, if you ever find yourself laughing at someone's dreams, or mocking the little things that make them proud, pause, because sometimes what looks small to you is the heart of someone else's world. And once it's broken, it may never come back the same. In the end, I didn't lose Liam to another woman. I lost him to my own blindness, to my impatience, to the moment I forgot that love isn't about better, it's about together. Now, as the moon reflects over the water, I whisper to the night, "I remember you, Liam, every day." Not with sadness, but with peace. Because even though we're miles apart, his lessons still bloom in every flower I plant, and in every smile I give to a stranger. He's in all the quiet places of my life. And that, I think, is what forever really means. In the end, wealth can't measure the worth of love. Only kindness can. And if I've learned anything from him, it's that the richest hearts often live in the simplest lives.